Hello. This video is a brief synopsis and explanation of the psychology of Adolf Hitler in relation to the atrocities he and his Third Reich committed during the early 20th century, World War II, and the Holocaust. This video does not glorify or venerate any of the acts he committed. It simply tries to understand how a human being could possibly be capable of committing such tragedies and giving a psychological profile to Hitler and understanding from a scientific and analytical perspective to how a human could even be capable of what he did. To understand and gain a psychological profile of Adolf Hitler, we must first look at his life. To place in certain environmental factors that could have possibly supported such a fragmented mentality in which he had. His book, Mein Kampf, does a decent job explaining this. Throughout his life, he always felt oppressed by other people groups, basically and constantly generalizing anyone belonging to those groups. In Mein Kampf, he mentions of the Jewish peoples of Europe as being parasites, and explains in detail his hate for Eastern Slavs and Marxists, mentioning how they should be overpowered in the need for Lebensraum, a German word for living space. He also mentions about seeking revenge over France for what he perceives as vengeance for what France did to Germany during the Great War. Already from these few examples, it creates a psychological profile of narcissism and retribution at the expense of others. This trait can be commonly linked to people with extreme borderline personality disorder, though psychoanalyst Walter Charles Langer goes even deeper into the mentality of Hitler. In a book based off of Langer's psychoanalysis report of Hitler for the Office of Strategic Strategies called The Mind of Adolf Hitler, Langer explains and gives many perspectives to multiple aspects to Hitler's mentality. The book mentions Hitler was reported to have coprophagic tendencies, which involves sexual acts and consumption of human feces, as well as Hitler's love for pornography and masochistic sex, though this doesn't necessarily explain anything, yet adds to the complex and intricate mindset of Hitler. In the report, it mentions Hitler could have possibly had untreated mental illnesses, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and possibly others. And these mental disturbances would have propelled any wild and inhumane thoughts Hitler would have had. Alongside this, it is also well known that Hitler consumed various drugs throughout his reign of power. These drugs including various amphetamines as well as various opiates, and he also pushed and encouraged for his army, the Wehrmacht, to often use Provitin, which is basically a pill form of crystal meth. This drug, methamphetamine, was thought to have fueled the Blitzkrieg and encouraged German troops to stay up and fight for days on end with no sleep. So with all this being known, so far we know that Hitler definitely was affected by some mental illness of sorts, and he was definitely what we would consider today as a drug addict. So now that we understand that, we must now look at how he used propaganda and manipulation to persuade others and himself into power. Manipulation is commonly used by sociopaths to gain personal benefit. We know that in the book Mein Kampf, Hitler attempts to make himself personable and relatable to the reader, while also modestly throwing in hatred and political beliefs towards people groups and governmental policy. This is, however, only the tip of the iceberg to Hitler's approach to manipulation. When Hitler entered politics during the Weimar Republic in the late 1910s, joining the DAP or German Workers' Party, which will later become the NSDAP or National Socialist German Workers' Party, colloquially known as the Nazi Party, many party officials were highly impressed with Hitler's natural persuasion and speech techniques, which heavily involved crowd manipulation. He began rising the ranks and manipulating his colleagues into his radical and unethical line of beliefs, in which he became more and more popular within Germany, mainly through his polemic approach to speeches, in which he used a conscientious rhetoric that encourages and supports its listeners and undermines any opposition and groups that goes against his mentality. He was considered by many people as a demagogue, or a so-called rabble-rouser, constantly stirring up the German people and assigning them a nationalistic mob mentality. Through his speech and political techniques, he constantly blamed many other groups and entities as the reasoning for the downfall of Germany, a political scapegoat of sorts. He would then, with his party, lead a march on the German government inspired by Mussolini's March on Rome, which ended in the deaths of 16 NDSAP officers and 4 police officers. Afterwards, Hitler fled the scene to his home and contemplated suicide before being jailed for high treason. During this time in prison is when he wrote Mein Kampf. Combined with his popularity and personable struggle, many other Germans felt against the governmental powers. He would ultimately fully take charge after being released from prison and rebuilding his Nazi party and then taking over government and installing the Third Reich. So with all this being said, we can create a substantial and compelling psychological profile of Hitler. We can see that Hitler was definitely affected by one or multiple mental illnesses of sorts. Combine this with his narcissistic and radical views mixed with the popularity he had in Germany, which ultimately reinforced and normalized these beliefs with him and others. It is the perfect cocktail for a dictatorial and radicalized leader who will inevitably lead a country and army into genocide, invasions, and war with the hopes of creating a great empire at the expense of the individuals felt as being lower subhumans compared to the populace. Although this gives an explanation for his reasoning, this does not by any means excuse the atrocities and tragedy committed during World War II and the Holocaust. It does, however, show the formula and cocktail that was produced for these atrocities to occur. Hopefully by understanding this and its relation to politics, we can use it to prevent radical political leaders and groups that will create such tragedies and catastrophic events in the future. For there is only one way for humanity to progress, and it is through love, understanding, and compassion. But for every war, murder, and bomb exploded, it creates a paradoxical and never-ending dividing of humanity's progression through our species' existence. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give a like, share, and subscribe so I can create more videos in the future. But with that being said, this is the Horror Historian, and I will catch you later.